This is the new Alfa Romeo Tonale, and it is very late to the party. You see, this is Alfa's first compact SUV, some 10 years after Audi launched the Q3 and 12 years after BMW brought out the X1. For those bored of SUVs, this won't be an issue, but for those that look after Alfa Romeo's finances, it very much is. That's because cars like this are extremely popular, yet aside from the aging Stelvio, Alfa Romeo doesn't have any other SUVs in its lineup, so there's a lot riding on the Tonale.
Okay, so hands up, I am an Alfa Romeo fan. So for me, the most important bit about this car is that it's not just a generic run-of-the-mill SUV. It's got to be like a taller version of the Alfa Romeo Giulia, if you will. So that means it's got to drive and handle well, it's got to have an interesting cabin, and it's also got to look really good on the outside. And from what I've seen, this is a bit Marmite. Some people like it, some people aren't so keen. I do actually like it, and what I would say is that it looks better in the flesh in real life than it does in photos, even though those photos are probably done on a lovely day in Italy where it's nice and sunny, and that's clearly not the case here. But anyway, I want to take you through some of the design details because there's quite a few, and we're going to start at the front where you can see these very purposeful 3x3 lights which we first saw on the SZ. They give it a really distinctive light signature, so at night if this car's coming up behind you on the motorway, you will know exactly what it is. Also, the Scudetto shield here on the Giulia and Stelvio, that's built into the bumper design, whereas on this it's its own separate unit, so that's nice and prominent. Come around the side and you can see the telephone dial wheels. We've seen them on Alfa Romeos for years. They look really good on this. They're 19 inches on the Veloce model, which is what this car is. On the wing mirror, there's a little detail here, the Italian flag to remind you of which country this car's from. And then just underneath that, we've got the GT line, which is like a crease. It starts on the front, goes all the way to the back. And we first saw that on the 1960s Giulia, so there's a bit of history for you there. Now we're at the back, and it's not as distinctive as the front end, although it still does have the 3x3 light signature and the light bar that goes all the way across the width of the car. That's nice. The Tonale badge. And this is something, a nice detail, it's the 8C window line, or as I call it, the widow's peak, because it's kind of coming in and then forming a point in the middle, just above the Alfa Romeo badge. So that's the outside of the car, but let's look at the inside, because I think the inside is perhaps where they've done their best work. So taken as a whole, the interior looks really nice, but there's also, just like the outside, some lovely little details. So for example, on the seats here, nice leather seats on the Veloce spec, we've got the Alfa Romeo badge on the headrest, which is stitched in, and you can get coloured stitching actually on the seats, and not on this particular car, but you can get that, so you can get it in red, and you can also get a little bit of colour on this bit of metal up here, which kind of gives a bit of personality to the dashboard. Also, for someone that's driven an Alfa Romeo Giulia for most of this year, I can say that the infotainment system in this is probably the biggest departure from what you got in the cabin of a Giulia, because it's brand new, it's Android based, it's a 10.25 inch touchscreen, and actually it's really pretty good. It's super responsive, so it's a nice clean design. It responds quickly to your movements. It's also based on widgets, so you can move around the kind of things that matter to you, such as the heated seats or the certain radio channels, so that they're there straight away. It's got Amazon Alexa compatibility. You can also get an app, so you can check the status of the car and you can lock it, unlock it, all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's just so easy to use, and it's such a big difference from the old Alfa Romeo infotainment system, which was really starting to feel pretty dated. Also, fun fact, I'm pretty sure I recognise this system from the Maserati MC20, so that's a nice little touch. You can have the same infotainment as a Maserati. Steering wheel in here is pretty much identical to the Giulia and the Stelvio, which is really good news because it's a super nice steering wheel, leather lined, start-stop button there, and some really easy controls for the buttons. Gear shift paddles, absolutely lovely, as they always are in Alfa Romeo. Big metal objects which make a nice click when you change gear. However, it's worth pointing out that if you go for the TI spec, you don't get the paddles. You simply get the gear shift manual override on the lever. So that's worth a mention. Behind the paddles, you've got a TFT screen for the digital dashboard display. It's 12.3 inches, and it's a big improvement over the digital screen that you got on the Giulia and the Stelvio, because it's a lot bigger and there's more functionality. There's not quite as much functionality as you get with, say, an Audi virtual cockpit system, but it is on a par with what you get on, for example, a BMW X1. It looks very nice, the graphics are crisp, and it's also got some kind of old school instrument design, which reminds me of Fiat's and Alfa Romeos from years back. So that's a nice little touch.
Rear seat passengers in the Tonale get enough head and leg room, and you will be able to get 2 tall occupants in, although 3 would definitely be a squeeze owing to the intruding transmission tunnel. Compared with the BMW X1, there's a little less space on offer overall, but it's still not a bad effort considering the Tonale's sporty looks. Meanwhile, boot space is 500 litres, pretty much the same as the X1, and unlike in some rivals, that doesn't change regardless of whether you have a hybrid or plug-in hybrid version.
Right, onto the driving part, and SUV or no SUV, an Alfa Romeo has to drive well, otherwise what's the point of it? I will start by talking about engines though, and it shouldn't take too long because in the UK we're only getting one engine from launch, and it's the 158 brake horsepower hybrid 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine. There will be a plug-in hybrid variant coming in 2023, but we're not going to get the petrol-only unit or the diesel unit which other markets are going to receive. So for the moment, we'll focus on what we've got here. And as I said, it's a hybrid, so it's got an electric motor attached to the 7-speed automatic gearbox, and it's worth about 20 brake horsepower and 100 pounds-foot of torque, which is very useful. What's also useful is it can run in electric mode only, so you can drive around without using a drop of fuel under certain circumstances. And to make it sound more appealing in marketing speak, Alfa Romeo has come up with some phrases to reflect this. So this car has something called e-launch, which is obviously when you drive off and it's on electric power only. It's got e-parking. It's also got e-queuing, so parking on electric power only, queuing on electric power only. And my favourite, e-creeping. Sounds like some kind of sinister online stalker, but actually it's just telling you that you can drive around at low speeds on electric power only.
To complement this, the Tonale also gets a belt starter generator for faster stop-start responses from the engine and an intelligent brake system that charges the battery via regenerative braking.
How does it all work in practice? Well, there's a few rough edges, if I'm being really honest, because it feels like the gearbox and the engine and the electric motor aren't really communicating with each other, especially when you've got it in the efficiency drive mode, because you'll be driving along at low speeds and in town, and the electric motor will set you off fine with the e-creeping, and you'll be driving along electric power only, but then when the petrol engine comes in, the transition isn't that smooth. There's often a kind of a bump or a lump, and it could be more seamless. Also, when you're cruising with the petrol and the electric motor both doing their thing, you'll sometimes find that you go to accelerate and you get the forward motion, that's fine, but then 100 foot down the road, you go to do the same thing and it responds differently. It's sort of like each element of the powertrain are looking at each other and going, well, I thought you were going to do the acceleration. And the electric motor's going to the petrol engine, well, no, you were going to do it. So you end up with a kind of gap in the torque curve or the power curve. And it ends up you pressing the accelerator even harder and then it jolts forward. So it definitely feels like it could be smoothened off a lot. And these are early UK cars, they're launch cars, so a software update I'm sure could probably improve it, but for the moment you will find rivals, hybrid rivals, that have a smoother overall power delivery, especially at low speeds and especially when it's in efficiency mode. Once you get up to higher speeds, it does improve. You get decent cruising manners, It feels more predictable with the power, probably mainly because the petrol engine is doing most of the work. In electric mode, you can cruise up to 50 miles an hour in electric mode only, but above that, it needs to be petrol and electric. It's fast enough, about 8.8, 8.9 seconds to 62 miles an hour. Doesn't sound particularly sonorous, but then no other car in this class really does. But it's fine. It's just at low speeds, it really does need to improve. On to more positive things about how this car drives, and the ride comfort is actually pretty good. This car's got the standard, on Veloce models only, the standard electronic dampers, and you've got two different settings on that. In the comfort setting, it really isolates the bumps well, it doesn't judder over cracks in the road, and it just deals with British broken tarmac pretty well. Refinement's also good. The engine can get a bit thrashy, but not the end of the world. You get that with small petrol engines. And overall, it's a perfectly good car to drive along in at normal speeds. However, put the drive mode selector into the sporty dynamic setting, and that's when you're going to find out if it drives and handles like an Alfa Romeo should. And the signs to start off with aren't great, because this is based on a Jeep Compass platform. So it's front-wheel drive, unlike other Alfa Romeo models, and, well, nothing wrong with the Jeep Compass, but it's not known for its handling ability. But for this, they've made it stiffer, and they've also widened the track front and rear. And the result is, yeah, as good as any other car in this class for handling. It's got a really pointy nose. You've got that classic, really fast and direct Alfa Romeo steering, so it feels agile. There's loads of grip at the front. It resists understeer superbly. It can brake the inside wheel to make it pivot more into corners. And it resists body roll well too. The only thing that's spoiling it, and this goes for low speed as well, is the power steering. The steering is good, the direct steering, it's nice and quick, but the amount of assistance that you're getting is way too much. And I'm not one of those people that thinks you need super heavy steering, because you don't. There's a happy medium, and this isn't on that level. It's really light at low speeds. It feels like a Fiat 500 when you press the city mode button and the steering goes all light. At higher speeds and in dynamic mode, it does weight up, but not quite enough. So you end up getting less feel out of the steering than I think it's actually got to deliver, which is a shame.
Before I deliver my final thoughts on the Tonale, there's one last thing that really stands out, and that it's that this car is the first to come with an NFT digital certificate, otherwise known as a confidential and non-modifiable record of the car's history. This, in theory, provides a cast-iron guarantee of the car's past and makes the process of buying and selling the car on the second-hand market a lot easier and more transparent.
So, what's the verdict? Well, they clearly built the Tonale to sell in big numbers. That was the primary intention. This has to work for Alfa Romeo. It's tapping into a potentially huge sector of the market that its German rivals have been reaping the rewards from for the best part of a decade. And while it needs to have a broader appeal, I think it's crucial that Alfa Romeo doesn't lose the identity of its cars in search of a wider audience.
Thankfully, the Tonale still feels and looks like an Alfa Romeo. It also handles and rides with sure-footed grace, the interior is excellent, and there's enough cabin space given its size. The hybrid powertrain, however, does need improving, as does the power steering calibration. They're the kind of things that second or third generation rivals have perfected, yet Alfa Romeo is still playing catch up on. They'll almost certainly get it right in the future, but for now, I reckon the best version of the Tonale is yet to come.